What's up, everybody? Mad scientist of all things hip-hop and wrestling. So with this video here, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. The topic that keeps rolling around on the internet, on the dirt sheets, WWE is in dire strait right now, trying to create the next big star. With John Cena, having, more and more injuries and getting old. He's 35 now and going out of a nasty divorce. The possibility of taking time off with him is getting there, and he got too much really to go. I mean, I think he has maybe 5 years left in him, but now is the time when you start trying to create that next guy. When you look back in 2004, 2005, when he was being billed as the next big guy, alongside Batista, from 2004 to 2012, that's a long stretch. You look at guys like Austin and Michaels, they didn't go that many years, in the WWE as the top guy for that long without, taking breaks and coming back or getting hurt and having to leave. Cena's been doing it day in, day out. He's the guy. So, you start looking and you start thinking, who is the next guy? You got to look at the FCW roster. You got to look at the guys on the main roster now. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and hit a lot of different things. I'm going to hit the FCW roster, people I think, are in that, range, who have the possibility, who are on the roster now, who are on the indies, and I'm going to give you at the end a definitive person who I think, and I thought about this for a while, I think could be a perfect fit for being that next big star. When WWE looks for their next big star, they look for the guy that they want. The prototypical star, or the guy that they like to be the next star, is somebody within the range of like 235 to 250, weighs that much, and from the range of like 6'1" to 6'4", a muscly type guy. WWE got lucky, a couple times with a guy like, let's say Brock Lesnar is a guy who's, moves around a lot more gracefully than a guy his size, and that's why he was, so great, and he jumped into that role as being a top guy so quickly. Even though he faded away, and wasn't able to maintain that, and had his problems, left, went to MMA, all that stuff. WWE over the last several years has been trying to create another guy to get to that lane, and they always pick these big muscly type guys, throw them out there and see what they'll do. Hopefully one of these guys will blow up. They did that with Cena and Batista. Cena ended up being the bigger star, but Batista ended up being big as well, and those guys were luck of the draw at the same time. Both guys worked, both guys were hot, so that that makes sense. But WWE tries, has been trying to throw big guys out there. The Mason Ryans and the Ezekiel Jacksons and those guys. Just big guys that, look the part but can't act the part. So we're gonna run through everything. Like I said, we're gonna hit the WWE's main roster first. Of the guys I think, I like, but it just doesn't seem like some of these guys are gonna make it. Whether it's age, whether it's look, whatever it is, height, any of that stuff. We're talking about the prototypical WWE star that they're willing to push. Somebody that they're willing to push, okay? Right off the bat, you look at guys like Brodus Clay, you look at guys like Ryback, who are guys that were getting pushes. You look at Antonio Cesaro now, Damian Sandow, Cody Rhodes, Dolph Ziggler. These are all guys that I think are in that lane to get that next level jump. And I'm going to just knock some guys out right now. Brodus Clay, doesn't have the gimmick. He's not the size, he's not the look that they want to be the top guy. So you take him out automatically. You look at Damian Sandow, by the way, got the shirt. Fantastic, by the way. Absolutely love. But this guy is, in his 30s. He's 30 years old. He's just, I just don't see this guy being the next big star. He's going to be a great heel. I could see him being a main eventer, but I don't see him being that guy. Cody Rhodes is a guy who I think is too small. They don't see him as that guy. Ziggler's an interesting, choice. Just because, everyone talks about him having that Shawn Michaels Mr. Perfect kind of mold. Being that guy that could really just fit in there and could be that next big guy. I don't think Dolph Ziggler needs Vicky Guerrero right now, but I don't know if the fans truly believe him as being the next guy. WWE, is trying that right now with Sheamus. It's doing okay, with him, jumping into that next lane. Sheamus is a good worker, for what he is, but to me, some of these guys just not working out. Now, you look at the FCW roster, guys that have that prototypical size and everything that they want. The thing that's hurting WWE right now, when it comes to making these guys, is their age. And the big thing I wanted to mention was, you got all these guys, you sign them to the FCW roster, and then they sit down there. They sit down in their FCW, NXT and FCW roster, and they just rot. They wrestle a whole bunch, and they wrestle a whole bunch. They spend 2 or 3, 4 years even in and on the FCW roster, and they just waste away, countless years of time that they could be in the main roster. I understand what Triple H and the backstage people are trying to do. They want these guys to come in with gimmicks. They want this and that and yada yada yada. But some of these independent darling guys who've been on the independent scene for so many years don't need that. You look at a guy like Daniel Bryan, you look at a guy like CM Punk. These guys came in as themselves and are arguably two of the most over guys in all of professional wrestling. Daniel Bryan be the guy that's too small to be in the WWE, too small to be a WWE champion, but being great as a heel, being great as a face, being a great worker, working with everybody well, that guy, that's just a brilliant talent right there. But still, you look, he does not have the size that they want. He's getting older as well. CM Punk is 33. He's the guy right now. A lot of talk with Randy Orton being out, Cena being out for a while. The focus of being the two big draws. WWE feels like the two biggest draws right now in their company are CM Punk and Sheamus. I can't disagree with that. I really can't. But if that's what we're looking at right now, it's kind of sad. That they spent all this time trying to build these guys up, and everything fell short. You look at guys, like I said, you look at Bobby Lashley was a guy they tried. This guy had the look. He could work. He was a graceful worker. He wasn't amazing, but he moved around, pretty well, and he could wrestle pretty solid. He couldn't talk. He couldn't talk to save his life. And anytime he got on the mic, it seemed like he got scared and just couldn't speak. It was a mess. But like I said, you look at guys. There is a couple of guys that are really young that I think that can really make that jump. But you put them in a hat, you pull a name out, and any of these guys could be stars. And the top guys that I think are in that lane are, you look at a guy like Dean Ambrose, who doesn't look like a muscly type guy, but in a lot of people's minds looks like being maybe the next Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's an interesting thought a lot of people have. Some people feel like CM Punk was the next Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's in that situation. He's only 26. That's still, gives you what, almost, you could say 10 years to work with this guy, but you gotta debut this guy. A lot of people talk about some of these guys debuting. I really find it hard, that to say that Dean Ambrose might be the most anticipated independent wrestler debut of all time, coming up to the WWE. Back in the 90s, you didn't know about these guys, because the internet wasn't as hot as it is. Ambrose, his debut, his anticipation for debut is just out of this world. People are waiting for this guy. And I think the anticipation, him jumping right onto the roster and going straight into it, I think he'll be fine. He'll be already over. I think the crowd will already even know who he is. That's one guy you look at. Look at him being, like I said, the next Stone Cold. You look at a guy on the indies that a lot of people like, and a lot of WWE seems to really like also, but is binded by contract for a while, and I think it's a good thing for this guy to build up and learn a little bit more. But he's young, and this is when you start building, and that's Adam Cole. People see this Adam Cole guy as like being like, yo, this guy is the next Shawn Michaels. He has the look, he has, you know, this, the that. We love this guy. You got to get him away from Ring of Honor. You got to work on it. He can talk, he can work. You know, he's a good guy. He's overall talented, but still not the prototypical look that they want. 6'1" to 6'4", 250 pounds, muscle guy. So when you put all that together, that's the size they want. You want a guy who can talk. You want a guy who can work. You want all that. You want the total package. So after further research, looking deeply through countless, you know, wrestlers independently, FCW, TNA, anybody that can get their hands on, narrowed it down to one guy that I think could be molded into something special. And this guy was on the FCW roster. He was signed to a developmental deal to WWE in 2008, from 2008 to 2009, and that is Brian Cage. Some of you may know who this man is, some of you may not. Mr. Get My Shit In, the effing machine. You know, this guy's fantastic. If you haven't heard of him, check him out. He wrestles all over the place, but he's mostly known for wrestling in PWG. He's got the look. He's a chiseled guy. He's 6 foot tall. He's 240 pounds. You know, he's 26 or 27, something like that. He's in his, you know, late 20s. This guy is primed. He's primed. He's been wrestling for a good amount of years. He's primed. He's got the look. You know, he can cut promos. He can work. In PW, you look at PWG as a promotion that is not really about storylines. It's about putting on kick-ass wrestling cards and getting the best wrestling possible. Well, you can't go out there and be a tree like, you know, the Mason Ryans and the Ezekiel Jacksons and, you know, Great Khali's and those guys. You have to be able to work. Brian Cage, to me, has the total package. I know he went by Chris Logan when he was, you know, signed by WWE. He was playing this like Wolverine type gimmick. I love the gimmick he's playing right now. The Mr. Get My Shit In, the Mr. Cocky, you know, arrogant type guy, almost like a Austin Aries kind of deal. He's still loved by the fans, and he's really breaking out in being, in my opinion, the breakout guy of 2012, along, you know, as a guy like Michael Elgin, who's a guy I could see, you know, breaking in there too. But he, you know, Brian Cage, to me, when you look at the prototype, when you looked at John Cena when he was in OVW actually as the prototype, and they were billing this guy, he had the look, he had the size, he had everything. He has this guy's the prototype wrestler of what you want, and he can talk, he can work, he can do it all. So that's my thought. Who do I think could be the next big star in WWE? I think WWE needs to get a hold of Brian Cage Taylor, whatever he's going by. I think he's just going by Brian Cage. He's wrestling in PWG. Sign this guy, give him a little time in FCW to build himself up again, and really come up with a great gimmick for this guy. Like I said, he can talk, he can work, he has the size, he has everything. And like, I thought about it for a long time. I'll link some stuff in the description for you guys. You know, some highlight packages of him doing, you know, some of his best moves, a promo or two or something like that for you to check out if you've never seen this guy. Those of you who are PWG fans who have been following PWG for, you know, the last year know who this guy is, and he's perfect. He's the perfect fit. And when I heard, you know, he was signed by WWE and they let him go, you know, I thought to myself, WWE dropping the ball again on a guy like this who can do all of it, who's the complete package, who has everything, you know. So that's my thought right there, ladies and gentlemen. Who do you think the next big star is? Who do I think should be the next big star? I got the guy for you. It's Brian Cage. It's Brian Cage. This guy is fantastic. He's a great worker, talker, has it all. I think WWE needs to take another hard look at this guy and really come up with something for him and mold him into something special, because I think he can do it all. And he's not, you know, the big thing about these guys who look like him, they mostly can't work. They can't have great wrestling matches, and this guy can. And if you need proof, go buy any Pro Wrestling Guerrilla DVD in the last year. In any match he's in, he kicks ass and does shit that guys his size, you know, shouldn't be able to. So, thanks for watching, guys. Leave some comments in the, you know, down there below. what you guys think, who you think, you know, in your opinion, you know, could be the next big star. It could be somebody on the roster already, you know. Look at, like I said, like at a Dean Ambrose, who's still young, you know, but I don't know. He doesn't have the muscles that WWE loves, and that's what I wanted to take in consideration, the look. So I'm gonna get out of here, guys. I am the mad scientist of all things hip hop and wrestling. Deuces.